Every time the World Cup comes around, there's always talk about who will win it all, but almost equally, people love to predict the surprises. This year, the list of dark horses is perhaps greater than last time, and one nation high on that list is Senegal. And so, in this video, we're going to talk about Senegal as well as the 4 other African nations at the World Cup and try to unravel what to expect from Africa at this World Cup. First up, some facts about Africa at the World Cup. Of the 54 countries in Africa, only 13 have ever qualified. Here are 13 in order from least to most appearances: Togo, Angola, Democratic Republic of Congo, Ivory Coast, South Africa, Egypt, Senegal, Algeria, Ghana, Tunisia, Nigeria, Morocco, and Cameroon. And here is a nifty table showing how well each of these countries have done in the World Cup. The first country from Africa to ever qualify for the World Cup was Egypt in 1934, and the next African nation to do so was Morocco 36 years later. This was back in the days where there were only 16 nations competing. Countries from Africa historically have struggled in the World Cup, with the farthest any of the nations have come is the quarterfinals. The countries that have done so are Cameroon, Senegal, and most recently in 2010, Ghana. 2010 was a historic year for African football, as it was the first time that the continent has ever hosted the World Cup in South Africa. This year was perhaps also the year with the most hope for African success, with 6 of the nations being included in the Cup rather than 5, due to South Africa being the hosts. That was it for fun facts, just to get us in the mood, but feel free to comment some more fun facts about Africa and the World Cup. Now, let's get into it. How will the African nations do at the World Cup coming in 2 weeks? In the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, there will be 5 African nations competing, which qualify through the African CAF World Cup qualifiers. Those are Cameroon, Morocco, Ghana, Tunisia, and the previously mentioned Senegal. Lots of familiar names here. We'll talk about each of these nations in order of odds to win the World Cup, starting with the least likely to win. And 2 quick disclaimers. 1, these odds are according to PointsBet, and so take their odds with a grain of salt as they're just a reference. And the second thing is, excuse my horrible pronunciation throughout this entire video. First, Tunisia, which sits at currently 500 to 1 odds of winning, which is roughly 0.2% chance of winning. Yikes. Tunisia, also colloquially known as the Eagles of Carthage, are in Group D with France, Denmark, and Australia, a tough group with 2 European powerhouses. They will be led by a relatively new manager, Jalel Kadri, who got the job this year and in the process helped Tunisia defeat Mali to reach the World Cup in the qualifiers. He has little to no experience coaching internationally, so doubts are high, but perhaps he'll help bolster the Tunisian team's chemistry, which is a tight-knit group of players that mostly play locally. Tunisia has some noteworthy players and partnerships to watch out for. For example, the partnership of Shkiri and Laidouni in the midfield, cutting off enemy attacks and creating opportunities for Tunisia's key goalscorer Khazri, an eccentric player that is good on the ball and has a knack for scoring wonder goals, although he certainly has his weaknesses. The defense is led by Bron, who has 35 caps and has valuable World Cup experience from 2018. Last but not least, the incredibly versatile Msakni, who's been injured often, including the last World Cup, but he's the type of player to catch your eye and score goals. Tunisia will look to break a spell of crashing out of the group stage as they've done in every single World Cup so far, that being in 1978, 1999, 2002, 2006, and 2018. While there is little belief in Tunisia, they have some interesting results this year. Since June 10th, they have won 3 out of the 4 games they've played, those victories being against Chile, Comoros, and Japan. They defeated Japan 3-0, which is another World Cup side, and the defeat was the most recent game against Brazil, which they lost against 5-1. I believe Tunisia can score against any side in the group, and that midfield partnership of Skiri and Laidouni will need to tame the creative midfielders of Denmark and France to be competitive. If anything, the previous World Cup, where Tunisia had Belgium and England in their group, proved that Tunisia can fight back against any of the big sides, and they're arguably stronger and more experienced this year. This seems to be a year of hope rather than expectations for Tunisians, but don't count them out, they have a chance of getting out of the group if you ask me. Next, the other North African side at the World Cup is Morocco, nicknamed the Atlas Lions. They qualified fairly easily, beating DR Congo 5-2 over 2 games to qualify for the World Cup. just like Tunisia, this will be Morocco's 6th appearance at the World Cup, adding to their appearances in 1970, 1986, 1994, 1998, and 2018. Speaking of, the last World Cup for Morocco was an interesting one. They placed in a group with Spain, Portugal, and Iran. A brutal group, but Morocco made every game close, drawing with Spain and losing merely 1-0 to the other sides unluckily. They definitely left an impression. This year, Morocco, just like Tunisia, has hired a new manager, Regragui, who just started in September. The short preparation time has left many worried, but he's wasted no time in charge, re-establishing connections with players that had conflict with the former coach. For example, star player Ziyech. Along with the creative and talented winger Ziyech, Morocco have a few more big names in big European clubs, such as Hakimi, star pacey right back for PSG, and it will be entertaining to see his matchup against Canada's Alphonso Davies and Belgium's Eden Hazard. There's also star goalkeeper Banu, who has recently let in less goals than any other La Liga goalkeeper within a season, beating the likes of Courtois and Oblak. The list goes on, with talents all over the pitch including strong center back Saiss and the goal-scoring threats Amrabat, Boufal, and El Nesri. Most recently, Morocco played 2 games in September, a 2-0 victory against Chile and a tie with Paraguay. Good results for a brand new coach. If you want to catch a sneak peek of this side before the World Cup, they'll be playing a friendly against Georgia on the 17th of November. The group for Morocco this year is Belgium, Croatia, and Canada. When you see that group, perhaps it begins to explain why Morocco has a 300-to-1 odds of winning this year, or a 0.3% chance. Croatia are World Cup runner-ups in good form, and Belgium got 3rd place at the last World Cup. And if that wasn't enough, Canada are in the form of their lives, topping their qualifying region. I see a lot of potential in this Morocco side, and I don't see them getting blown out with many close games. They have quality in every area of the pitch, and I see Banu saving them at least a few times and Hakimi and Saiss leading the defense. They have explosive and creative players on either wing with Ziyech and Hakimi to make sure they score at least a few goals in this World Cup campaign. If they can create enough goals and get lucky in the defense, who knows? If the last World Cup showed us anything, it's that Morocco can fight against these big teams, and just like Tunisia, they might be even stronger and more experienced this year. Ghana is next, also known as the Black Stars, with a symbolic black star on the Pan-African flag. Ghana managed to upset Nigeria, one of their greatest rivals, to reach the World Cup this year. Ghana have 3 appearances at the World Cup, all in the 2000s, qualifying for the 2006, 2010, and 2014 World Cup, and in those appearances, you could argue that they're the most successful team from Africa of all time, only losing 5 of their 12 games and making the knockout stage in 2 of their 3 World Cup runs. Ghana is a real wildcard this year, especially since they've been undergoing serious squad changes over the last few months, recruiting big-name dual-citizen Ghanaians to play for Ghana. The squad is led by German-born Ghanaian manager Ado, who also works as a talent coach for the big club Borussia Dortmund. Who exactly will be in their squad this year, as mentioned previously, is uncertain, but here are some names you can watch out for. Amarte is a defensive-minded player with significant experience in the Premier League for Leicester, as well as being one of the most capped players on the international team. Alongside his defensive duties, he's a great passer of the ball and will be critical for build-up play from the back. Young attackers Kudus and Fatawu will offer counter-attacking football that Ghana can be expected to play, with both being excellent dribblers offering energy and pace, also being very difficult to get off the ball. Ghana also has more experienced talent in Ayew, who you might remember from the last 2 World Cups, having been runner-up player of the tournament in 2010 and scoring 2 goals in Brazil 4 years later. He is now the most capped player for Ghana ever, with 109 caps. Notably, he's also been playing domestically in Qatar for the last season, winning the league with Al Sadd. These are all established international team players, but there are more on the way, potentially joining the squad for the first time ever. This includes players Tariq Lamptey and Inaki Williams. Ghana's group in this World Cup is Group H, with Portugal, Uruguay, and South Korea, a challenging group with some interesting stories. Portugal and Ghana were in the same group in Ghana's last World Cup, where Ghana lost 2-1. Portugal and Uruguay have their own story, but most importantly, Ghana and Uruguay have history at the World Cup. Ghana were moments away from being the first African team to reach the World Cup semi-final in 2010 in Africa's World Cup. A ball was heading into the goal, but it was blocked by Luis Suarez and his hand. Subsequently, he was sent off and Ghana would miss the penalty that followed, and then go on to lose the penalty shootout shortly after. It's safe to say that Suarez cannot visit Ghana, and it might be a rough game for him this year. For Ghana, I'm hopeful for them, especially in the future with all this young talent. but it'll take a whole lot for Ado to put all the pieces together here with such short notice. But we'll get a first glimpse when Ghana play a pre-World Cup friendly against Switzerland on November 17th, a strong World Cup side. Ghana has 300 to 1 odds to win it all, which is a 0.3% chance according to odds makers.